team are from the North Bay, from above Palo Alto, let's say. So yes, there's some California beyond Palo Alto. I know you don't think that way, but like, I was talking, where's Tim at from Guru? I was talking to Tim, you live in San Francisco. I know you've never driven this way. I'm glad you made it all the way down here, and perhaps you'll even make it to Gilroy one day, but that's way out there. That's way out there. At the Silicon Valley Education Foundation, not only are we proud to be hosting with the great partners, but we really think about our work as, the Valley is known for great phones, great devices, great search engines. It's not known for education technology. It's not known for, people don't fly from all over the world to the Valley for education innovation. They fly here for almost everything else except that. So we brought together lots and lots of communities to say, how can we do that in the Valley? If you think about Santa Clara County, which is basically from Palo Alto to Gilroy, there's about 267,000 students. That's about the size of the entire state of New Mexico, larger than 17 other states. So it's a pretty big market if you think about it that way. 13,000 teachers. If you think about East San Jose, where a lot of these folks are from the district, in that system, albeit in 8 school districts, there's 80,000 students. That's larger than San Francisco and Oakland combined in terms of the student population. So it's a pretty big market. If you think about it from a business context, how big is your market? There's a lot of students here, there's a lot of opportunity here. There's also 32 school districts. Now there's some people who would say that's too many, but as an entrepreneur, think about all the possibility of all the different tests you can run in different districts and different systems. We've got a couple systems represented we'll talk about in a second, but really think about how do we connect to that. At the Education Foundation, the way we're thinking about this is how do we change policy so technology can be better in the hyper-local in a lot of these 32 school districts and beyond. We're thinking about how do we do direct programs in these districts, and we're thinking about innovation. One thing we're going to be piloting in January with Teacher Square and a few of us coming together with Jesse is to really think about how do we get some of you entrepreneurs upstairs in our offices to pilot this model of, say, how can we connect you better with teachers where you have reference customers, where you have school districts to help innovate in your products faster and bring them to market. So Jesse and I, come talk to Jesse and I afterwards. We're looking for a few entrepreneurs who want to pilot. We have space, we have lots of other resources, but our idea is we want to increase student achievement. That's all we care about. And how do we do that better? So with that, I'd like to switch over to the panel. Once again, I'll be tracking under EdMeet all your questions, and hopefully we can blend them. But before we start, are there any teachers in the audience? Educators, stand up. Take a bow. How many entrepreneurs in the audience you're actively working on? Go and stand up as well. Any funder, any investors in the audience? Just so we know if there are any out there. We'll make sure if you're bold enough to stand up. Also from the Silicon Valley Education Foundation crew, there's Bob Nichols in the back, Amy Wong, there's Melody, Rosemary, Anna, a bunch of folks. Please feel free to ask questions to anyone during or afterwards as well. So with that, we're going to get started. Let's do a quick round of self-introductions. What do you do and how you got there? And what you'll learn is these folks are actually on the ground in these districts. Give us your 1-minute pitch on who you are, what district you represent. Give us a little bit of scope of that district as well, so people understand the context of that district. And what does your position do there? Chin, we'll start with you.
So my name is Chin Song, and thank you for being here. I'm the Director of Technology for Milpitas Unified, and we have 10,000 students, and we have 13 schools. We have 9 elementary schools and 2 middle schools and a comprehensive high school and an alternative high school. We also run some of the education programs in the county jail and downtown jail systems as well as adult ed. So we cover everyone from 4 years old all the way up to death, right? Near death, not death. So,
No crematorium yet.
no, not in that space. So our challenges are wide, and so, you know, with our 10,000 students, 39% of them are on free and reduced lunch, and so, you know, being one of the lowest funded districts in the county, we try to stretch our dollars as much as possible. And just a little bit about me, I originally started out at Cisco, and at Cisco I ran some of their global web systems, and then before that I was part of their worldwide education team. From there I took a look at some of the inequity numbers and then wanted to help out in education. My original intention was to kind of go in, check it out, come back out. However, as the teachers in the audience know, it's really difficult to leave the classroom. Right? It pulls you in so much, and the individual stories of students and the lives that you affect every day makes such a difference. But then there were some systemic problems that I also saw that couldn't be solved from the outside. So we decided to, or I decided to stay in the system and then apply for this position that I currently hold, and we're making some significant changes that I'll share with you briefly.
Jim, well, I was introduced to Milpitas Unified at the great institution of Santa Clara County Jail, but tell us a little bit about some of the technology initiatives you have running, just a high level. We'll drill in real deep, but just at a high level.
So some of the high level things that we're doing is we're looking in the next 3 to 5 years to go one-to-one. And we'll do that primarily with Chromebook devices for all 10,000 students. Right, so budgetary measures, we're looking at about $1 million of expenditure per year. And then we're looking at going into big data. Right, currently, we don't even know what questions to ask because we're not collecting enough data to do so. And so, along with that, we'd like to venture into predictive analytics. Right, not closing the achievement gap, but fill it before the kids ever get there. Also, another initiative that we have today is just getting the devices out. Last year we had no Wi-Fi, so we're also able to implement a district-wide Wi-Fi this year, and we did the installation in about 3.5 weeks, and then got the system up in about a month. We're also doing blended learning, which means we're taking rotational schedules, upping the initial class size, but also taking some of the students out to be independent learners. We have no computer science courses, so we're hooking up with outside vendors to get some of the educational content in, and then drilling that all the way down to kindergarten and preschool, and then hooking up with some of the folks who are working in that space to align the curriculum map, and then along map it with the Common Core.
So, Jen, when will each of your students have a device, a Chrome device?
Well, currently about 20% do today.
20% already do?
Right, so in about 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years you'll roll it out. And what grade did you start in?
We actually start in kindergarten, so we have kindergarten kids logging in to Google Apps.
Okay. Interesting. That's interesting. Okay, Bruce?
Thanks for having me here. My name is Bruce Neff. I'm with the Oak Grove School District. It's actually a pre-K 8 district in South San Jose. And I taught 4th and a little bit of 6th grade for 8 years, and I've been in my current position as technology curriculum specialist for the past 3 years. In my position, it's kind of unique. Actually, it's a very nice position in that I get to wear a couple of different hats. I work very closely with the IT department in our district, and so on certain days I may go out and help them with some things with infrastructure and troubleshooting computers and such, but I also get to wear a hat where I get to work with kids and teachers, and whether it's training or supporting or having conversations with administrators at the sites about the types of programs they may be interested in or applications that may be beneficial for their kids. So it's a very enjoyable job. I've enjoyed the challenges and some flexibility to get to do what I really love doing, to be in with, starting to teach. Got into that because I love learning, and taught kids, which I just had a blast. And when I taught the kids, I could bring technology into the classroom and just try different things, but now I get to do that on a much larger scope. Our district is just shy of 12,000 students. We have 19 schools, 16 K-6 and 3 intermediates. We have a number of unique programs, which you'll hear from one of our great teachers here at our sites, which STEM programs, Global Laureate, working in partnerships with the Silicon Valley Education Foundation to get these great ideas off the ground and get technology in the hands of our students in ways that otherwise wouldn't be possible because, you know, as we all know, things can be very challenging, not only with budgets, but with the mindsets.
So Bruce, how many computers are in your district with 12,000 students?
We only have, I would say, right now, on average, there's approximately 3 desktop computers in a given classroom.
Okay.
We guarantee that there's one for sure functional because we use a student information system that relies on connectivity for taking attendance and such. But our biggest challenge is the fact that we don't have a solid refresh cycle on those. So of these computers, some of them are, I was just discussing today, they're on average, they could be 6, 7 years old. And that's actually some of the better ones. I mean, I touch computers that are like maybe 12 years old. You know, they're just barely limping along, and that's can be commonplace.
If you're trying to get me to stop complaining about my iPad 3, I mean, you know, it's,
Yeah.
We'll come back to you, Mariana. No, we'll come back to you in a second. Rudy, why don't you go ahead and
I know why, yeah, I know why.
Go ahead, Rudy.
I'm Randy.
I'm sorry, Randy.
That's all right. I can be Rudy for a fee. And I can call you Bob. Whatever works. We're close.
What would you like to be? Let's start there.
Oh, I don't think it's good for this crowd to hear what I want to say. My name is Randy Phelps, and I'm responsible for all the technology and blinking lights and beeping things at Eastside Union in San Jose. And based on your numbers, we're about 10% of all those numbers. 10% of the teachers, we have 10% of the kids. We're only a high school district, so we don't have the, we don't have as many of the diaper problems that you might have in a pre-K situation, but we have some, I'm sure.
Why don't you explain that a little bit? What does it mean to just be a high school district versus a K-12, just so everyone
We do
understands?
9-12 plus extension adult ed, so we take kids from 9th grade forward. We have interactions and programs. I'm working on a National Science Foundation grant with Evergreen Valley College right now, which is really fun because it also involves the FBI and Homeland Security, which is really fun if you get to go to the Homeland Security offices because you realize like that's just another thing for NSA, what they're actually working on. And their interests in the program are even more fascinating because it's not necessarily education, it's detection, early detection. So predictive analytics, so to speak. And of course, I love
I'll be Bob for that.
Yeah. Well, they'll know anyway. It doesn't matter. You can tell them anything you want, but they do know you when you walk in the door. I mean, deeply. Let's see. Projects that we're working on at Eastside. We're in phase 1 of what we're calling Wireless 1. Wireless 2, we passed a measure this week, so we're moving forward. We're moving forward with the second phase of our wireless, and the goal is in phase 3 that we'll have neighborhood wireless. And our idea is that learning isn't, strictly at the border of the school, that we have to provide for the communities as well. As part of that, so when I got there, there was no cable identification. There was, we've always been working ad hoc, low budgets, things like that. You just kind of rush around. So if somebody gets a tech call, it could take 2 or 3 hours just to trace out where the wires run. So we've actually, in this phase, we used folks who got hurt at work. They can't go full back to driving a bus, for example. Most of our people are bus drivers who've gotten injured, and they're actually going out and identifying the cables for us. It turns out they can do that. So we've actually been reusing monies that we were spending within. And we're doing cross-training with our techs so that we actually have a lot deeper knowledge base for our folks while we're doing this project. And it was one of those things where, to be honest with you, I got the job. They were part of the way in, and my background, I looked at the job and said, this won't light up. And they were like, yeah, we know. But we got to keep going because it's in the scope. And it was about a $500,000 miss, but we filled the gap with a little under $40,000 just by using some creative ideas like that. So when the wireless is in phase 1, that'll be complete on the 27th of this month. And we're full bore into an identity management project, which I think is the most interesting thing that schools don't do, that we should do. If you work at a large corporation, I've worked at Apple for a little over 10 years, And, you know, the identity management piece is just amazing. Things should push at you the way a NAC box says, so that when you log in, it's single sign-on. Your things find you. The information that you need, it knows, it already pushes. Back in the 90s, I built a piece of software we called the Wonder Box. You know, I was an entrepreneur, so, you know, you have to use these big phrases, but it actually did do some predictive analytics for kids in terms of achievement. So we could predict which kids, based on previous year's data, would succeed and would fail. And we took a term from the 70s, love bombing, and we would go grab those kids with pairs and hit them before. And in our school district in Colorado, we were able to eliminate retention. And so there was no social promotion. Kids actually hit and in Colorado, they actually did do standards, benchmarks, and indicators. California's never really gotten there, but we did in Colorado. So, so there's the identity management piece, and then our teachers will all get laptops of their choosing with admin rights. So if there's teachers in the room, they're going to go, no way, really? But yeah, if you do the identity management
What do you mean
piece.
of their choosing? Don't you just have to pick either Mac or PC? Isn't
No.
that how the world in
That is
education
so
works?
crazy. After 10 years at Apple, like, I'm so tired of people who, like, you don't know what at Apple really cares. They don't care whether you have a PC or they could care less. Like, you should just have what works for you, like, and that's it. We always thought we made a good device and, like, people would pick it. And if they didn't, okay, well, we should make it better. But this whole thing, anyway, so we're not doing that with our teachers anymore, and we don't need to. We're using a case box. If you guys have messed with those are really pretty neat little boxes that basically re-image the machine if somebody gets wayward with it. Our goal is 18 to 24 months, all the kids will have a device.
In 1824, and you didn't say your number, how many students do you have?
About 24,000 total.
24,000.
A little
How
bit
many
more
sites?
than north of that with adult ed.
And how many sites? 11?
They're
11 high schools?
really, you know, if you count based on CDE, it's 14, but it's really about 11.
11 high schools, okay. Let's come back to you. You don't run a school district's technology department, but you run an innovative program in a school. And tell us just a little bit about your background and how you leverage just technology in that program and some of the hurdles that you had to jump through to get there.
Okay, so I'm Mariana Garcia. I teach Science and Adventure, which is a 5 through 8 STEM program out of Oak Grove. He is the one that I call when I have issues. So we started this program with 40 netbooks kindly donated by SVEF, and from there we borrow, we figure out how to get them. We're right now at around 1.5 to 1. But these are all borrowed devices. These are non or stuff that kind of works. And we will be piloting Want to Bring Your Own Device in January for a week. And we'll see how that goes. I know why he called me in last. I'm like, okay, I'm the one that's in the trenches. I'm the one that, oh, this is really cool. Let's go try it out and see if it works with the kids. And if it doesn't work with the kids, well, we'll try something else. And but I'm the one. I would say I'm the ultimate customer for all of you. I am their customer. I'm their and I am also your customer.
So thank you. So let's start with the connectivity challenges. In my mind, there's 3 challenges. One is Wi-Fi, internet connectivity. We worked in high school, Randy. We worked using video crash the Wi-Fi. So how well are your districts and other districts connected there? Second is devices. I think, Chin, you talked a little bit about a lot of us are going to be at one-to-one at some point. How close, what are the hurdles to get there? Is it a hardware challenge? And who do you need to convince to get that hardware, whether it be Mac or PC in a classroom? And third to me is, what do you do with this hardware? And that's what all these great people are going to solve for you, is once we're at one-to-one, how do I log on, and what are your goals in doing that? So starting with number 1 in terms of getting your schools ready, what are the hurdles? How do you fund that? Where does the money come from? Go ahead.
Oh.
Anyone, yeah.
Well, in the Clinton administration, they started a program called E-Rate. And E-Rate made all the difference in the world. If you have a Cisco phone in your school, for better or for worse, it never would have existed or been sold or bought had E-Rate not funded, for most districts, 90% of it. So for most of us, the internet that you're riding on, we pay about 10% for it. Some of us pay 20, but more or less all of us pay about 10%. of what it would actually cost if we tried to buy it on the street. So that piece of connectivity, in other words, the wire to your doorstep, the federal government effectively
You leverage that.
has subsidized and they've given it to us, and that's what's made the internet possible in our schools. If that ever goes away, poof, because it's a huge number. If I showed you, you know, the scale of like my budget, somebody was saying, well, we need $1 million a year. My budget's like $2 million. My budget is $2 million. I manage a $2 million budget for a high school district. Crazy, right?
Right.
At YB, the 30 that you're talking about, I've only been there 3 months, so it didn't happen when I was there. But the connectivity there, we increased by tenfold this last summer. So it went from a 100 megabit connection to the internet to a gig. So if you go back there tomorrow,
It'll be there.
well, I should say on the 28th, if you go wirelessly, if you're wired up, it'll work tomorrow.
So what about your districts? Will the wireless work?
I can answer that. It's, do you want me to answer the wireless working or the
Sure.
funding problem?
Wireless working, how did you fund the wireless?
So how we funded the wireless is we had a bond that went through. In our district, we identified about $357 million worth of need, yet our bond program was only $95 million, right? So we had to use it frugally and kind of determine which roofs that we wanted to duct tape and which ones we wanted to completely repair. So these are some tough choices, but in going with some of the hardware choices, that there are companies who are willing to work with you to give you, especially for education, some significant discounts just because they want to start doing good, right? So even without some of the E-rate programs, I think we would have been okay, but E-rate does specifically help. You know, how do we connect? We have, for about 13 schools, we have 600 plus access points, and they run at 450 megs both ways, right? So combined of 900 megs. I'm getting in more technical details, but we're well covered. The challenge is the internet speed going out. We went from 100 megs to a gig for all 13 schools. We'll need another connection. I'll just give you a recent example. We just lit up the high school about 3 weeks ago. On the third day, people started connecting. Within 30 minutes, the last couple of weeks, about 2,500 to 3,000 devices connect within 30 minutes. From there, every day, they suck up about 50 gigs of data. Now, we didn't even advertise that wireless was available, right? Never mind. Today, our kids, high school kids, will be receiving, a portion of them are receiving their one-to-one laptops. So we have a digital business academy, and 220 kids will be receiving their devices to take home. However, we're able to fund that through some creative methods. Don't use textbooks. Since a lot of our teachers don't use textbooks anyway, let's just...
Before we go there, so your schools are connected through wireless and every student can connect?
They can't
Right.
connect.
Bruce, the train that just went by had wireless on it. Are all your schools connected?
Oak Grove, we, through a bond in the past, we did put in wireless, okay? We were a Cisco access points. The planning at that time 3 years ago was that wireless would supplement the wired connection. The mentality, the culture was if somebody's going to get access, they're going to connect in through a cable. And that's, we have determined, so we have like a little over 200 access points at approximately 20 sites.
So you're working towards it.
So we have found recently, approximately a year ago, with our adventure program starting, is what kind of got things in gear, is, for a good year, it wasn't even really utilized. It sort of just sat in the background because the culture was, that's going to supplement. They didn't even really broadcast that it was available per se. Oh, what are those things? Oh, don't worry about it. But then, so about a year ago, I was into the job my second year, and I said, hey, we need to flip the switch and get this thing turned on. Let's get people to start using it because, you can foresee that, if you look at home, think of how we connect to things. We don't sit down at a desktop and boot it up and rely on that connection on the wall. No, we have wireless access points. That's the way things have to connect. So as soon as we split that switch and started making it available and opened up this guest account, we very quickly found out that, whoa, people actually want to use this thing. It's amazing. And we quickly quickly realized that we don't actually have, we don't have the density, we don't have the coverage. It was a poorly designed
So
system.
in Oak Grove, you're working on it.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's actually something that's going into our 3-year plan, and it's the priority right now for us. Top priority is to completely revamp our wireless infrastructure so that we can get an access point in every classroom, and we can have, what is it, about 1.5, devices per individual is like your standard that you'll probably find.
Great.
Yeah.
So the 32 districts we work in, this is the first step we're trying to work with each one to say, let's make sure the wireless works before we get to the hardware, before we get to what you do with that hardware. So I'm not picking on Oak Grove, but we need to help Oak Grove get there. And we, meaning everyone in the room. Now, where's Angela Estrella? Angela has a question. How do you support teachers to use the technology you have at your school sites? Mariana, you'll go last. And you'll validate. You'll validate. You'll validate these guys. But Randy, let's start with you. How do you? I mean, you've got over 500 teachers, right?
We've got 1,200.
I'm sorry, 1,200. Yeah, 1,200 teachers. How do you roll out? A lot of what we hear is teachers are the hurdle. They don't even know how to plug their computer in. Are they able to use it? Do they have a need for a computer? Forget the students for a second, and how do you train them on it?
Well, again, I'm fairly new at Eastside. I just finished building a program at Campbell Union where we ran a program that was colloquially called I Teach. And what was nice about that is we used a viral approach. So instead of a lot of schools kind of glom onto the train-the-trainer model. Instead, what we did was kind of a standard business practice where you develop incentives for people. And there are consistent incentives across the board for them to do good activities, because I would love that everyone just suddenly wants to start doing good, but I would rather speed that up a little bit by putting incentives to it. And so the way we actually built training was that people actually gained, not credit per se, but they gained access to things, and as they saw opportunity. So as an example of that, I was in a meeting the other day and they said, oh, we're so afraid, what if we go to one-to-one, the kids will steal the devices out of the classroom? And I said, wouldn't that be nice? And they said, what do you mean? I said, for the first time in the history of American education, there'd be something in the room that they would actually want. So one, I think it's unfair. I think it's an unfair assessment that teachers don't know how to plug them in and turn them on. They do fine at home. And so what we've been doing is we've actually been looking at, there's an old human interface guidelines book if you're a programmer, if you build hardware. There are books on this stuff, right? Sure. And what's interesting is there's books on this stuff for teachers. Like, most teachers have never had a class on how to set up their classroom. They don't know optimal, essentially feng shui for the classroom. So we did that in that program in Campbell. I didn't have a ton of money, so I was like, I'm going to give them something that I know will change student achievement tomorrow. And the first thing was, we moved the desks around in a scientifically thoughtful way, it would change. And what was funny was they all said, it feels so much better. Where'd you learn this? And I was like going, it's like right there, right? There, you can read the monographs. They're 500 pages. They're doctoral dissertations for people.
That's one. Those are a couple of ways you now shared.
For us, the training program for us that we're going to put in at Eastside will be a range of things. So there'll be face-to-face trainings, and a lot of this has to do with what people perceive as what they need versus what we can determine that they actually need. You have to hit both, or else you get neither.
Such an Apple guy. Yeah.
Well,
that's great. That's great.
So for us, we're going to have face-to-face, but we're also utilizing things like Khan, or at least that approach, right? Sure. Having YouTube and making sure that nothing's...
Explain. Everyone knows what Khan is? I assume this crowd does.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
So, the videos have to be 3 minutes or less, because people, none of us watch TV. So what people do in their regular life, and my favorite thing, I worked on this project once with these folks out of Australia, and this little girl, I got to interview her. And in the course of talking to her, I said, so what difference is this making for you? Because if it doesn't make a difference, why do it? Life's short, right? So she said, well, with the Australian accent, which we all know the reason why all the ads are that way, because North Americans respond to Australian accents better than they will any other accent on the planet. So if you want to sell somebody something, get an Australian to do it for you, and they'll just buy based on that, So I'm going to do a bunch of my training with Australians. I kid, but I'm actually going to do that for a couple of things I really want them to actually listen to. What the heck? I know it works. If we know stuff works, why would we not use it? It's a tool. So anyway, this little girl said that education was like a ride on the Qantas Airlines. That you get on the plane, they make you turn off all electronic devices, you fly for 6 or 8 hours, and then when you get off, you get to go to your regular life, and that's what school's like.
That's great. That is great.
And that's what we've got to change.
That's a great line. Angela, thank you for your question. Please send your, the rest of you send your questions. And we're going to ask for a lightning round now just to move a little faster. But Mariana, from a teacher perspective, and I know you're technically advanced, but your colleagues, how do we convince teachers? Is it really what Randy said, they don't know what they don't know, or is there something more? Do they need time? Do they need an all-day professional development? What do they need?
I kind of disagree with you in the sense that, you know what, just like you said, we can plug in at home just fine. We can go find our stuff just fine. We do not need 6 hours of professional development on how to use a
Agreed.
tool.
Yeah.
What we need is just, okay, oh, you know what, there's this thing out there, just let us go do, and you know what, again, we'll determine whether it works for me or it doesn't work for me. But you need to trust us that we actually know what we're doing, because we kind of do. And so, it's just, and we found it out. We found it out with Bruce. It's just, okay. Well, we need some more wireless. Okay, well, we'll need some more wireless, but trust us to go and fix those laptops that don't work. Trust us to figure out the kinks. Trust us to figure out the bumps. We will, and we are motivated to do so. Every single teacher that I know is willing to put in the time and the effort and and we do have the know-how.
So do you disagree with the assumption which we hear is that the teachers don't want to use this stuff?
No, we do. We do, and every single time that we go back and it's like, oh, again, there's this tool. Well, I go and explore, and all the teachers that I know, we do go and explore and see. We're not in the dark ages, I promise you. Our classrooms may look like we're in the dark ages, but we're not.
Great. So you need to procure lots of technology. And let's get beyond the wireless and the hardware. Let's assume Oak Grove now. And we've talked to Jose. Jose's approved 10,000 devices. Everyone has a device. How do you procure other technology on those devices? There's a lot of folks out here who have great technology that they can bring to you, and which will decrease your costs by open source and getting rid of textbooks, which will increase your efficiency, and it will increase student achievement. It will do it all. I'm sure there's people out here who can do that. How do they get to you? How do you purchase in your school district?
Well, our current, the way that we've done it historically through Oak Grove is because of the budgets, we don't make purchases at a district level and supply equipment. It's a site-based decision. This is the way it's always been. Our culture is shifting over the year since I've been in my position. We used to be very restrictive in terms of what we would even help people with. And when it came to making those decisions, it's basically up to you, because we don't have the money to give you to purchase these items for you. And it wasn't very equitable, because our sites, there's a lot of difference. In a certain area, you might have a lot of community involvement, where the parent association can bring a lot of money into that space, or perhaps they're a Title I school, and so they have access to certain funds. And so there's a big disparity, and we're starting to kind of change that mentality now, and how we look at how we do things like Title I.
So let's assume it's a district-based decision.
So
how do people, do they come to you? Do you have to take it to the school board to make these decisions? How does Mariana get what she wants? If Guru wants to be inside Oak Grove and Mariana wants it, how does it get there?
Primarily, I take a lot of my time to get out to various venues, conferences. I was just at the SEPA and seeing what's out there. I feel it's my responsibility and my position to see what's available and see how that would actually impact our ultimate client, which is the student. That's always my mindset when I go in. So I need to see, how is this device going to enhance our students' success, their achievement. Yeah, that's my primary concern, and I'm beginning to see that more just over this just before summer came out. With iPads that are kind of like culturally it's like a big incentive. People like it, right? And so I was pitching it not so much because it's really popular or whatnot, but it was a device that I could actually this is something that you can place not only in just in the teacher's hands, but this is something that's very easy to put in students' hands to allow them to interact with the lesson and the content through, mirroring to your.
So you're being exposed to lots of these programs, like after this meeting, if you're exposed to a lot of these products, you can think about it for your district. And you've got all kinds of money now, based on Tuesday, right? You're gonna have all these computers, you got upload, download, you've got, so how does this decision making work in Milpitas?
It's really either centralized or decentralized, right? We have both processes. For things that affect, for example, like district decisions are made on one-to-one deployments, and then also for teacher laptops, anything that, hardware-wise, that we buy in bulk. If it's a specific hardware that will be used in the classroom, we give enough autonomy to teachers to say, go ahead and discuss it with your principal, use your site funds to make that happen. For software, so for example, like the Google Apps store, how we kind of decide in terms of, do we put that on a more bar? And it's, we have a pretty rigorous criteria, right? So one of the highest ones is, does it fundamentally change the teaching and the learning environment, and does it help kids, and does it provide us data? Right? So if it doesn't pass that hurdle, then teachers are free to install it themselves, but we won't use it as a global tool.
And how do you judge for that? How do you measure for that?
So there's several stages. One, I mean, I do an inordinate amount of research, and then I have a team of people who I can go to ask them about their opinions. Then we'll run a small trial, and if it works well, then we'll test it with a larger group. From there, if we believe that that particular piece of software and application will help students and the teacher, then we go ahead and deploy it. Hardware-wise, we'll just test it internally, and if it's compatible with our networks, then we'll go ahead and purchase that. As you know, today, most of hardware has been commoditized, and we see them as endpoint devices, and we don't necessarily care about the brand. Even the reliability on it.
You've already made that decision. You're going with Chrome, so no one's going to sell you anything else, right? But once you have that hardware, back to the software. So someone out here who meets your 3 goals, who makes decision for purchasing? Is it a school board level decision? Is it a superintendent decision? Is it your decision?
Sure. So there's several levels on that as well. The school board decides on things that has student touch. So for example, student information systems, or for example, School Loop, which a lot of schools use. If it's a larger contract, it must go through the school board. Usually before it gets to the stage, we discuss it in executive cabinet, which is all the assistant superintendents and myself who make that particular decision if it comes to technology. Right? So it's not just done by one person. If it's a small scale deployment under a certain amount, then I have the free rein to make that decision.
That's really helpful. So Randy, Janine Swatton, Janine, where are you?
Right here.
Janine's got a question for you, and Randy, we'll ask you this question. What is more popular? I'd call you Rudy too. That'd be okay.
Rudy's all right.
What is more popular, blended learning model or flipped learning model? And I'm assuming you're familiar with both, but what will stick? I mean, has any of this actually made it to classrooms where teachers are actually doing this, or is this
Buzz
just
versus
theory?
reality,
Yeah.
right? Well, right now it's all buzz. There are places I could take you. They're not in California. I take that back. Fissler Elementary School in Fullerton, California. You could go see blended learning, and you could go see the real deal. It's real. It's real. There's also a school district, and I want to say it's in Manhattan Beach, California. You can go see it. And that superintendent at Manhattan Beach, you can walk in and set up an appointment and go for a visit and go see it for real at an elementary level. And it's real. And the people are good, and the teachers actually teach, and it works. I would say the future of all this is going to be in flipped learning, because the model for how we're going to do education is going to actually transform. And part of the most hated buzzword I have right now is the fiscal cliff thing. If I hear it one more time, I'm actually going to stop listening to NPR. I'm going to have to. They don't say it on KMVR yet. Gary Radnich would never say it, so I may just have to switch. But I think the flipped classroom has the greatest amount of promise. And part of that is that that it will require blended learning. In other words, you'll get both with Flip. With blended, you're going to end up in a traditional environment, right? It's my great fear of smart boards, if you've seen smart boards. My fear of smart boards is that it reinforces the wrong people to be at the front of the room. And even though they can be really great in the right hands with enough training to get to the critical amount of training that you'd need for the teacher to really do it, you already have a great teacher in place who wouldn't need it in the first place. They could go with like a projector and an Apple TV and Doceri, right? A different kind of, right? Okay, so the flipped classroom to me has tremendous promise, and it's the way I think that most people actually would have liked to have gotten education. We've all been to meetings, right? Nothing worse than when people read their PowerPoint slides. Currently, kids go through school, and pretty much everyone reads their PowerPoint slides like for life, like 18 years or 12 years or however long it takes, it seems like forever. With a flipped classroom, the idea was that you'd have seminars and discussions and you'd have activities, what schools really should be about. So like where I live is extremely rural. I live really rural. And the kids out where I live really shouldn't have to go off the ranch. They should get to stay on the ranch and go in once a week for everything else, right? And that would be cost effective, and we could give better educations to kids. They could have better social lives. I mean, I just really think the promise is there. And that's not just a faith-based idea. I think the people who are doing it, there's a lot of evidence to support it.
So let me go through each one of you. I'd like you to name 3 apps, and Aditya, are you here? Aditya's asking, I'd like you to name, because we're running out of time, name 3 apps that you're excited about, that you'd like to see in your school. It could be for students, it could be for teachers, it could be for information systems, it could be for whatever you think your district really needs, and then I'll come back to you, and just so you can store it, I'll ask you name one problem you'd like solved in your school with technology. Who would like to start?
So the first two that
What do
come
you
to
use?
mind.
Yeah.
Okay, Edmodo,
Okay.
Pixton,
Pixton.
yes, and LearnZillion, which is my new, actually 4. Okay, Edmodo, Pixton, EdCanvas, and LearnZillion. And LearnZillion I learned about 2 days ago, and that is kind of like my new favorite.
You're already using it. Great. Who'd like to go next?
I'm sorry, what was the other one? Edmodo, Pixton, and?
Pixton,
LearnZillion.
LearnZillion, and EdCanvas.
EdCanvas.
It's at the elementary school level. It's an iPad app called Ignitus, Agnitus. That provides a curricular map as well as fun games for kids 2 to 6, and they're building that out a little bit more. For the Chrome app, I actually like Typing Club, right? And I think that will provide some competitive advantages for our students as they go into the more computer-based testing. Right? So we're going to start with a certain set of criteria at the kindergarten level, so if they can type, they're not thinking about typing when they're in 5th grade and 6th grade testing. And then probably if I were to say what type of program do I like on the web, not necessarily an app, Team Treehouse. And that will allow the flip type of learning, except it will take place of some of our classes that we usually have.
I would, in terms of applications for an iDevice, I'd have to agree. Edmodo, I actually just got into this recently at a conference, and it's truly amazing, because I think the power of it is it kind of brings that community together where people can do it.
Edmodo.
Yeah, Edmodo is fantastic.
Yeah.
I would say I like Doceri or Splashtop whiteboards, primarily because I'm really kind of trying to get the technology in the kids' hands, and this is a vehicle for them to be able to share their work. And actually, they're in control of the interactive component, like that.
Okay.
And not necessarily an I-type Apple app, but a program that we've been piloting in the last year is Read 180. It's actually a full-blown, excellent results with our special education. It's just been phenomenal. Our gains have been amazing with that. So.
Randy, at the high school level.
So when I read that question, I read it to be my dream app, so there's nothing out there.
Are you implying we gave you the questions early because you're going to ruin my journalistic integrity?
Like all good TV shows, they'll cut this out before, during the commercial part. So there is an app that is a reading app, and it's for early readers, like we're talking like 5-year-olds to 9-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
And that app allows you to adjust the story based on your reading ability. that technology, every time I showed that technology to people, and every time I used it in the classroom, every single person that I've ever shown it to said, can I have that for my
What's the
band?"
name of it?
You know,
It slips your mind. All right, let's keep moving. What's
you
the
can
next
find
one?
it.
What's the next one?
Well-
What's the next one? Okay.
So that's
That's all you
that is
got.
if any developer here, the AI component that you need for it is pretty rigorous, but at the same time, if you develop that for the textbooks, because everyone's going to go to kind of this wiki style textbook,
The sequence.
and when they go there, the idea is that you can kind of do the Mike Saylor stuff that he did back in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? You know what I'm talking about? So it was predictive analytics, but it was environmental. So he was the guy that figured out, like a Victoria's Secret, like exactly what to stock in each location and how they didn't used to have clearance sales there, right? Because they knew exactly how. So that technology that's in that app, it has a slider. And as you feel like you're more ready, you slide it and the language becomes more complex. The concepts become deeper.
That's your dream app.
That's my dream app. That's the one, if you had that one, it's printing money.
Dream apps. I need your dream app in 30 seconds, though. Jim, do you have a dream app that you're looking for from this audience to
I do,
produce for you?
It's a fully integrated student information system that's better than LearnSprout and Clever. Take a look into the Shared Learning Collaborative, and you'll find more info.
Great. Very concise. Thank you.
I'm going to jump on your dream. That's an amazing, I've never heard of that. Something that you can actually scaling, that's our biggest challenge too, in 4th grade. Huge range. I had kids that were reading at a kindergarten level up to 12th grade. And to be able to deliver content they can all share on, but to scale it interactively, that's amazing.
Got it. Mariana, any dream app?
Improving on that app, or adding, not improving, but adding to that app is relevance. So what if my math kids were able to type in their zip code and be presented with problems that involve going to Oak Ridge Mall, which is the mall that is right there. That's like, oh, okay, now it's for me as opposed to the 30 melons that
That's good.
fall
The
from
South Bay has
TV
malls as
and-
well, so
Yeah.
we want to make sure these San Francisco types know that.
Yeah,
right?
exactly, or whatever, exactly. I mean, whatever, just
So-
that relevance into the community.
So some of the heavy, I know you guys do the education technology, but your counterparts, your assistant superintendents of curriculum and instruction are really worried or concerned about this Common Core thing that's coming in 46 states, and I know you're all familiar with it as well. There's a question from the audience, and there's a couple of questions from the audience around this, but how are you thinking about, it has a strong technology component, how they're going to ask the questions, it's going to have a strong AI, artificial intelligence component, it's going to have all these things. At your level, are you guys thinking about getting the hardware, getting the wireless right, and how do you roll out Common Core in 2015 when it comes down the pipe and ready to go? What are you doing about that, particularly from the technology perspective, not from the education perspective? We can go into that for days and how to sequence that. But what are you doing about getting ready for Common Core from the technology perspective?
So we were one of the first to sign up for the Common Core computerized testing. And so we're running through the trials and kind of figuring out what works and what doesn't. So that's what we're doing from the technology side.
Anyone else?
We also jumped in on the pilot. I was participating at a site just a week ago, and I think one of the biggest things that I'm seeing is that everybody's concerned about the infrastructure, which is key, because if you don't have that in place, then you're in trouble.
Getting it right.
But also, I think we got to keep in our minds is once everything's in place, you still need to have a person to facilitate how you're going to get 30, probably 5 by then, 8-year-olds to log in and take this test, and that's training your teachers. Yeah.
I have not encountered anyone who is afraid of this. Everyone is very excited about it, and they all want to do it, especially compared to what we're currently doing. They all see it as a really great next step. So I spend a day a week working on Common Core things. I work extremely close with the instructional side, and that's part of my background as well, so I like that side. For us, I was part of the initial testing in the committee to develop the stuff for the state, and there were lots of wrong-headed things that got stomped early. In the discussion, the things that the state really well-meaning, nice people, clueless. And we were all pretty mean as far as like we made them painfully aware of like how they had it wrong. And they to their credit, they've adapted to a very high degree. So on the technology readiness side, I think that part is not going to be nearly as big a challenge. What will be a challenge is the way that we build things to guide people toward the idea that the test is part of a culminating experience, so that it's not a pullout. You know, we test every day. We've made it into this culture in California specifically where it's a negative, where we think we're testing the kids all the time. Well, all good teaching, you're evaluating every minute of every day with the kids. You have to be. You got it? You know, some teachers do that. You're doing it all day. What we have the opportunity to do with this, with technology, is the idea of even if you're tallying and the kids are doing polls all during class. I mean, if I were still in the classroom, that would be precisely what I'd be doing. The kids would be doing what you're going to do, or commenting.
Testing.
It would be constant. And I think that that's really the promise of that. And technologically, if our networks are halfway decent, and if kids do get to where they all have devices and they are individuals, we can change the periodicity for the testing, we can change the way we go about it, all those things, right?
Perfect. So before they get their closing arguments, some of you, for those of you that don't have a hardware device that you're posting on Twitter, any questions? And we're gonna take go ahead.
So, my name's Paul Smith, I'm from LearnSprout,
LearnSprout will be ready to achieve
yeah,
that.
no, we're going to address that. No, we're really interested in institutional sales and barrier to entry for startups as it relates to enterprise software. You mentioned the price, or you suggested that there was a price point where decisions have to go to the board. Does that number typically vary by district?
It does.
And, you know, for a startup that has a 12-month roadway, 18-month roadway, typically, some of these institutional sales cycles can take a year, sometimes longer. So breaking that barrier for large enterprise software is particularly a challenge. You know, you think about Inman Campus, Power School, you know, transportation management systems. These have been around for 15, 20 years, some of the software. You want to talk about all the software. How do you see that potentially changing and turning those types of sales from a slow growth model to a rapid high growth model?
Before you answer that, any other questions? No other questions? Meredith, you promised me a raucous, heavy-duty, connected, you know, crowd. I mean, what's going on here?
Fine.
Go ahead, Rob.
Nice.
I teach at San Jose State. I teach educational psychology, and I wanted to appreciate the comments you're making. It sounds like you have an educational psychology lens, Randy, right?
Uh-huh. Or Rudy.
Rudy,
Up to you. I'm flexible.
So I'm just curious if, in implementing technology to see like how is it going to work or not, has there been any kind of I don't know consideration of how children learn, what's the motivational climate, what, you know, how is it being presented, is it too much information all at once, how much can they store, you know, so there's a science of cognitive science that could really, I think, help this field move forward quickly. And I wonder if any of the efforts that you've seen have tapped into that, because I'm happy to hook you up.
So
I don't
you
know
can
if
totally hook me up. I'm
Okay.
totally interested in, if there's something you want to do, we're in the same neighborhood, like, let's do it.
So, all right, so we've got two questions on the table. Who'd like to answer them?
Well, there's, I mean, since I'm the person who, that is what I do, right? I buy big stuff. There are laws and there are policies and there is education code in the state of California. And there are measurable amounts of dollars that when they get to a threshold that's been set by local policy, in our case, like if it's over $50,000, with conditions, I have to go to the board with it. And the board is strictly a judge. The board, a good board, never evaluates the software. They take the recommendation that their folks have given them. But they are the final judge. They say yes or no based on the recommendations of staff and based on their faith in the staff. So reducing the sales cycle on something like a student information management system, the sale part of that, having done giant one-to-ones at Apple in my life, I know all about the 18 to 24 month sales cycle, and that's why I gave you 18 to 24 months, because I know exactly what I'm going to sell in my own district. So for that, you've got an uphill climb unless you can come up with some kind of a pricing model that would get you under the threshold. The problem is that you'll run into the 3-bid requirement. The only time you can go as sole source is if you're selling something that is so utterly unique and it requires documentation that's probably going to exceed what you'd be able to do with the Sims. So realistically, you might have to do what they did at Power School initially, because I remember when they were in Western Colorado, when they first started in Utah, I worked with those guys, and we actually we were like the 4th customer there, in a little district in Colorado. And what we did there was, we did increase the sales cycle because the Sims business was so small. At the time, there were really only 3 players, and they were all giant. And we worked out a deal where it didn't appear to be as large, so the threat for the district was an opt-out model. So that may be the way you explore, but it's tough because the dollars you're going to have in order to be able to do what you really want to do are going to be great enough that they're going to hit those thresholds to be long sales cycles.
And does cost also drive the RFP, or is there potentially a way where if you lower costs, you can get around the RFP?
If you sell strictly on cost, so this is a little bit of business class now, I'm sorry. As far as like from my experience, if you sell on price, you'll have an unhappy customer about 100% of the time. And if you look at, Dell is a great example of that, where they sold hard on price and they've face planted, right? In terms of like customer perception and all those things.
Jim, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. I would go through the sales cycle as a cycle of trust. Right? So first, you have to have something that works. And then from there, do people trust it? Right? Do you have some professional development that goes beyond it? The political challenges all could be overcome. You don't have to be the lowest bidder, right, on a particular item, nor will there be tons of bids unless it's a crowded market that everyone's trying to get into, right? And typically, schools won't invest in companies that may go belly up, right, or don't have, don't have a good monetization model, because we'll study that as well, and that's why, for many of the software, software that they're giving out for free, we oftentimes question, right? Because on the investment side, and we take a look at it as if we're a VC, right? Because we're really investing in your particular software. So on the back end, we look at it and say, well, this company, is it built to last, right? And what type of passions do the folks have? And then look at it from a perspective of, if we're to implement this for the long term, right, would we be okay recommending this to others? So typically, it's a longer evaluation cycle, not because, sometimes it's politics, right, but oftentimes it's not. It's just, we have to get enough buy-in from different entities, right? We have 26 secretaries at schools who will be using it. No matter how slick it is, right? Does it pass the secretary test? You have principals with differing opinions, right? And the board, you're right, absolutely right. They're the final judge.
It is what it is. So I'm already, Jesse's going to jump up and throw something at me. So we need to close this out. Real quick, closing thoughts. And here's what I'd like to guide you towards your closing thoughts. As entrepreneurs, what advice can you give them? I think we're on the theme right now. What advice can you give them in producing great products for your students? Now, what are you looking for? So if there's someone out here, well, what are you really looking for? Someone had a card, maybe they've got it here. Who'd like to start? Mariana, why don't you start? Because we keep
You go
pushing
first.
to the end.
Yeah,
So tired of
exactly.
going last.
I mean, well, we go to the common core. Having really those students in mind, having in mind that the student is the ultimate consumer, and it needs to be user-friendly, it needs to be easy, it needs to be something that also attracts them in some way.
Great.
Yeah, I think just agreeing. Ultimately you're everyone here in this room. If you're selling something, you need to sell it to the kids. If you talk to the right people at the district, and you can prove that your model works with the kids and they enjoy it, and that you can demonstrate, using some analytics or whatever it may be to prove this is a proven product that works, and they are engaged. Great. I made reference to Read 180 earlier before. We just tried it out with special ed. We had some money to put into it, and we thought it'd be good. But I actually got letters from these kids in special ed at the end of the year, and it's like, I love that. When you're your teacher and you get those letters saying, I love when I did this. And that was like my favorite time of the year. I'm like, I have them in my office still, you know, and that told me that, yeah, it's a huge company, you know, they have a lot of money they can throw into this, but anytime you can get the kids to get that buy-in and like they enjoy it, you know, so like if you're testing something out, go find a bunch of kids somewhere and say, hey, try this out, start with them. Because if they don't like it, it doesn't matter if we like
Yes.
it, it's not gonna work, you know, it's not gonna go.
It's gonna, I mean, it's gotta be sticky. You know, just follow the Gladwell stuff, right? I mean, it's not, I mean, it's the impossible thing. It's simple and it's impossible, right? The second thing I would say is spend your time in the app space. Don't write applications for computers anymore. Don't waste your time. Avoid feature creep. Stay small. Don't be all things to all people. The thing you do really, really well and make it as sticky as you possibly can. The depth will come with the product. Like after you've got it out for a while, the depth will just keep coming and coming and coming, and that'll be the second cell and the third cell and the fourth cell. Would be my advice.
That's great. That's great. So how many of you guys are parents here? Yeah. So build it as if you were, I have a 1-year-old, and that's the perspective that I look at, right? It's, if I make a particular decision, will my kid in 20 years' time will say, Dad, that was a bonehead decision, or that was a fantastic decision. And so one of the things that I also worry about, and we actually, to your point, we look at times that the kids are on the computer, right? And we want to minimize that, not maximize it. And I think one of the competitive advantages that we have in public schools is that we have land that kids could go run on and roll on the grass, right? And it's, we actually want to measure those things as well, right? How are they treating each other, right? Character development. How are they as people growing up, right? And we don't want them, it's a little bit contradictory, but I don't want them hooked on badges, right? Because now we develop a token economy, right? Where if you do this, then you get this. Sure, you get kids hooked into it, and then what, right? After they grow up and those tokens go away, then what happens, right? So we really have to think about, consciously think about what type of human beings do we want to have. We always talk about sending messages to the future, right? Kids are our messages to the future generations. So, you know, despite all the technology, we're trying to feed in the character-based education there as well as look at applications that transparently feed us data rather than here's another thing that a teacher and a student have to interact. So we're trying to minimize that. So if you have an app that will save people time, so the teacher can, you know, pat the kid on the back, tell him a word of, you know, encouragement, give the kid a hug. I think that's the most powerful application, not an application that tells you, hey, you've done a great job, we love you.
Your best teachers are some of the most difficult ones you've had. So you know, at Silicon Valley Education Foundation, we've been struggling with this question for a while. How do we connect the education, the challenges inside these school districts with the entrepreneurs who are actually passionate and who are taking the risk to go out and actually produce these great apps or products for our most vulnerable kids, but all our students. You know, there's over 300,000 students here. And if you look at the gap, over 50% of these kids are not prepared for college when they finish high school. If you look at the numbers, they just get worse and worse. If you look at the achievement gap, there's a 30 percentage point gap between Caucasian students and Hispanic and African American students in the Valley. So I mean, these are some big challenges. And when I think about this, you know, I think about up 280 and up 101. All the need is up 101. All the best and brightest students are up 280. And if you want to work in schools up 101, you will see the highest need districts, and these guys work at those districts. And I hope at the very least you think about visiting one of their schools. Going to YB, I remember Yerba Buena High School where Rudy and Randy work. We had 50% of the kids who go into that school in 9th grade don't graduate from there in 12th grade. These are the challenges they're struggling with. And how can technology help address those challenges? I think those are the big questions that all the educators have. And I hope you can first come visit them and come see it for yourself and help them achieve those results. And we'd love to work with each and every one of you. And between Jesse, Meredith, and I, please talk to us. We'd love to be helpful in making that connection as well. With that, join me in thanking these great panelists.